I'm Nate Davis again. Today I'm going to be trying to persuade you that there are a lot of problems associated with suburban sprawl. Historically, I've been one to kind of avoid voicing my opinions about anything. I personally believe that whatever your thoughts on something are really your own business, and just don't make it my business. That's kind of been my approach to everything. I really don't like people telling me what to think, so I've tried to avoid that in everything that I do. So when I was coming up with a topic, I was trying to think of something that maybe wasn't really considered before, and maybe wouldn't get people up in arms and make a big deal out of it. So I came upon Suburban Sprawl. I talked about the suburb before in this class, and the reason being my honors thesis that I have to write, all my research is based on that. So for the past year and a half or so, I've been doing a lot of research and working on that paper here to hopefully graduate, and that's where all the interest stems from. In all of that research, almost every source that I've come across makes some mention of suburban sprawl, and most scholars today are really, really negative about the suburbs and the sprawl that's happening. Basically what sprawl is in a nutshell is this uncontrolled and unregulated growth of the suburbs over any given area. Sometimes, in fact, it can get so big that entire cities are connected by their suburbs. The best example of this is the Boswash megalopolis, which is just this continuous growth and development all the way from Washington up to Boston. And Harrisburg is really on the western edge of it. And even most recently, in the past 3-4 years or so, the area between Harrisburg and York has actually grown together, has developed together so that it's now continuously connected. So that's kind of what sprawl is. I think a lot of us here live in the suburbs, I believe, and this area right here alone is a suburb of Harrisburg. Even though Middletown is its own town, everything in between, it's all developed. There's nothing separating the spaces. So we live with the effects of sprawl every day, whether we realize it or not. I think a lot of us, we don't really realize what effect it has. But 10 years from now, when we're out buying our own homes, you're with a family, anything like that, I think it's really important to consider and have expectations of what you should get out of a community, and not just what you're given. Don't just settle, well, this is what there is, so we'll take it. I think it's really important to have some understanding of where you live. The current pattern of suburban development really isn't the answer. Journalist turned activist James Howard Kunstler wrote, "We shall have to live with its suburban development's consequences for a long time." One of the biggest problems and promoters of suburban sprawl are cars, and the ever-expanding growth of the interstates. If you look right here, all these big red lines are interstates and highways, and that's where all the development is taking place, right along those roads. As we continue to build more and more highways, we're building more and more suburbs along with it. And it may sound ridiculous, but adding more lanes to highways actually makes traffic worse. It encourages more people to drive on those roads that they may otherwise try to avoid. I think Los Angeles is a perfect example where they continually build 8, 9, 10 lanes on either side, but more and more people just keep flooding onto those highways. In the book Suburban Nation, it was explained through this popular aphorism: trying to cure traffic congestion by adding more capacity is like trying to cure obesity by loosening your belt. Today, the effect of sprawling highways manifests itself in numerous ways, but highways alone don't build sprawl. As highways allow the edges of cities to spread further and further out, developers went along with it. It was cheaper to build along these highways and further out from the cities, and there were less regulations. So they really had no responsibility to do anything but build. They just built whatever they felt like. And the proximity to the highways, it was a great place to build. It made a lot of sense. But in the long run, it hasn't helped out. One of the biggest single laws that really affected that was included in the 1954 Internal Revenue Code, and it's called accelerated depreciation. Accelerated depreciation basically allows developers to build buildings and then write off the value of the building in taxes within 7 years. What that does is it encourages developers to make really cheap buildings that don't last. Dolores Hayden explained it by saying it created a gigantic hidden subsidy for the developers of cheap new commercial buildings located along the strips, so along all these highways that we have here. What we have today are now abandoned buildings that they were cheap. They weren't made to last more than 7 years. And developers, they just build further and further out. They don't have any responsibility to make the buildings last or resell it to anyone. They can just write it off and get their money back. The current landscape of the suburbs is also affected by zoning laws that we have today. So here alone, we have to limit where things are built. So houses are in one place, the mall's in another place, and work is in another place. And the only way to ever get to one thing or another is by driving. Suburban sprawl affects not only the physical layout of a community, but the people that live there too. And women and children, I think, are affected the most by it. In Suburban Nation, it's argued that for women, the role of journalist, banker, or marketing director is exchanged for that of chauffeur, with the vague hope that their career will resume when the last child turns 16. Women now have this responsibility, or a second job almost, to take care of their families at home while working a job for a lot of people. Children are also affected. They rely on their parents for just about everything under the sun, which is expected, but this can make a lot of complications based on where you live. Children's lives in the current pattern we have are pretty much constrained to their yards. Their front yard is everything that they have, and that's where their entire world is. And that's great up to a certain age. I mean, I wouldn't want, my 3-year-old walking down along the roads and just all out and about. But as children age, activities they're involved in move further and further away from the house, from that front yard. And that puts increased pressure on parents to find some way to get them there. So it's either carpooling or spending money to get an additional car to support the family. And that costs a lot of money. Teenagers, they get bored. There's nothing to do. You can either go shopping or you can go eat somewhere, but there's nothing else to do. And you can only do that if you have a car. There are many solutions to suburban sprawl that are way too extensive for me to really get into. I'm not really asking anyone here to change the way they live, but perhaps change what you expect out of a community. It's okay to expect the best, and up to now, we as a society have gotten less than that. 10 years from now, when you're all looking for a home or moving to a new area with your family, hopefully you will consider how the physical layout of the community affects you and those most important to you. Thanks.